Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of You Cannot Be Serious on lyrmedia.tv. info@lyrmedia.tv is our email. If you want to make any comments or suggestions or just leave off a bit of air, we don't mind one bit. We're delighted to welcome a new member of our panel tonight, and that is Mr. Nick Rabbits. Good evening, Nick.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Nice to see you all.
And welcome along. Stephen Collins, welcome.
Hello, how's it going?
I see you changed your background, but you're flying now. You were flying a while ago, but you're flying now.
I know, but I was wrote it down, which is very sexist altogether, no, not fairness.
It was a shy.
It was lovely.
Good evening.
It was out of Game of Thrones.
I was the only woman on the panel, and you're
very tasteful.
Good evening, Dirk de Klein.
Good evening, listeners, viewers, and fans. After buying into this one.
and Melody.
Oh dear, classic.
and stalkers like Melody.
Good evening, Mary. And good evening, Chris Price. Welcome again.
How's it going, lads?
We may have one or two more if they get started joining us, but we'll bet the way in for this tonight. And we generally have 3 or 4 topics we put to the panel for their consideration. We're opening up tonight and we're putting the question. By the way, all the opinions on this show and every other show are our own individual opinions and not necessarily the opinions of Larry.
Not all their media opinions. It's all in the company's manifest. So don't listen to Pat. He's sliding through his teeth there.
True to form, so.
It's policy.
So, the black book for you. Is it time for the legal profession to advertise their prices for normal transactions? Is it time for the legal profession to come in line with in the modern 21st century and do that? Chris, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think they're probably the only people that I can think of on the top of my head where if you're looking for their services, it's usually at the end where you've been told how much it is rather than at the beginning. We're at the moment of getting some work done to the house, so we're getting a tiler. We've asked the tiler how much. We know how much he's going to look for. We've gotten a kitchen done. We know how much that's going to cost. We're getting an electrician done. We know exactly how much electrician is going to cost us. But if we were selling a house, which we had to do recently, we didn't know until the house was sold, turned over, keys given over, of what their bill was. So how am I supposed to? It just smacks of that joke years ago about the solicitor. They said when a guy knocks on the door and he says, "Hello, can I ask you a question?" And the solicitor says, "Yeah." He says, "How much do you charge for three questions?" He says, £3,000. Really? £3,000? Next. That's what they do. They just basically, you don't know until later how much they charge. And at that stage, it's too late because you can't shop around. I'm lucky that I have a good solicitor in Limerick who is one of the most reasonable guys. And he'll tell you exactly before you want something done. Chris is going to cost X amount, blah, blah, blah. This is what I charge. Fine. And he'll tell you because that's his fees, right? But if you go to, I've seen solicitors before where you go to them and they don't tell you how much they're looking for. And it's then when you go and get their services or whatever, then they put the fee in. A friend of mine went to a solicitor there about 2 years ago over an employment issue, was in there for like 20 minutes, half an hour. And then 2 weeks later, you get an invoice for €250.
And Nick, what do you think about this idea that is it time for them to display their prices for what we call normal transactions?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It is. It does lure people going into a solicitor's into a false sense of security, and it's very kind of Mayfair. You know what I mean? It's very kind of. Yeah, I could go in and be immediately €75 down just by making eye contact with the solicitor. It can be disrupting people in financial trouble. It's true though, isn't it, Mary? You're laughing, but
no. I'm laughing at the idea of the way you said it for just making eye contact.
Laughing with you.
It's true though, isn't it? It's true. It's true. Yeah.
It's 100% true.
absolutely think. Now, there is a counterpole in that perhaps on the other hand, people might need legal advice and they wouldn't seek it. They might be put off if they do know the price, and if they feel the price is prohibitive. Often, if you do have a stone solid legal case and you could stand to win money, there might be an element of not wanting to necessarily speculate to accumulate. So there is the counterpole as well. You know, I mean, if I know I'm going to go into court and get X amount of money, you know, that would definitely take the edge off paying €75 for a consultation if I'm going to get 400, 500 back. Do you know what I mean? So there's that counterpole as well.
Yeah.
And Dirk, what do you think? Is it time for them to at least give display prices for what we call normal services, like appearing in court to represent you because you have a ticket, you must act summons and routine stuff like that?
Well, first of all, if I make eye contact with my solicitor, it's going to be half price anyhow. But
Dirk has only one eye.
other than that, yes, they should advertise everything they do.
I must remember that now when I want to solicitor next time.
I've only got one eye, so it's half price.
But
That's a very good point.
But they should advertise the prices and for all the services they provide. Now, actually, like Chris, I actually had a good solicitor, and I was due a bill, but unfortunately, she went out of business due to malpractice. So whatever works she did for me, they have to pay for it. So.
And Mary, what do you think? Do you think that it's time for them to?
Yeah, I do, but I also think that it's time that, especially for medical negligence and things like that, it's so hard for people to get people, certainly in this city, to take on cases against, say, the health board in this city or a hospital in this city, or anyone in the city for that matter. If they're a Limerick-based solicitor, you've got to go outside of the country to get a barrister to take it on, and you've got to pay the doctor abroad over €1,000 or pounds, the equivalent of £1,000, before you ever get an answer back from them. You have to hand them around £1,000, and then they'll come back with an answer. Now they can come back with the answer that you don't have a case, and you've handed them £1,000. So I think that all cases should be taken no fault, no fee, because you have unscrupulous solicitors, you have very honest solicitors.
You're talking about medical negligence and all of that.
I'm talking about any case should be the same, should be treated the same. If you go into a solicitor for a car case, in most cases, I think in all cases, it is no fault, no fee. Or if you have an accident, it's no fault, no fee. But if you go for medical negligence, you have to pay more or less upfront, and you certainly have to put the petrol into the car, basically. Now, once that's done, the solicitor has to be either moral and principled and fight tooth and nail, like the solicitor you were talking to today, who fought really hard and got huge landmark cases or payments. But some solicitors will make deals with other solicitors, and you paid out the money, so they're at no loss. And I just think that all cases should be no fault, no fee. That way you're secure in the knowledge that they're going to fight tooth and nail to get their cut.
And Stephen, do you think it's time, I think we have unanimity in this, for them to at least display their basic costs to you for what we call normal transactional fees?
Oh, very definitely, I do, because they make huge money, absolute huge money, and you have no idea what you're getting yourself in for. But I've been lucky. I've only really needed a solicitor twice, and once to get our mortgage, and once then to make a will. And they told us up front, what they were going to charge.
Mhm.
You know,
That's
which was
very
very
good.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
which was extremely good, so that we could plan the cost of that into the mortgage. And the
Well,
whole
like you, Stephen, the only serious solicitor I had to engage recently, not recently, many years ago, not to finalize my divorce in court, I had to have a solicitor,
Yeah.
and my ex-wife as well had a separate solicitor, obviously. But I had no idea whatsoever what's it going to cost till it was over, and I dreaded it. But anyway, I was lucky because my costs and my ex-wife's costs, because we were working the same job, so we compared bills when they came out. Her bill was 8 times the cost of mine for the exact same transaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
The exact same transaction.
But
Oh,
see, the problem with Pat is, you see, your solicitor knew he was dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in fairness, trying to get money out of a Corkman, my God, that's hard. Right? You know, and in fairness, right? But the problem that you have there is that a lot of, I think that you mentioned about the medical negligence cases.
Yeah.
It's very rare to get a solicitor that will take on cases like that because of the effort and investigative work, and plus having to go through the system as is with the Department of Health, because the Department of Health will just deny everything, right? They would just that's the aggressive tone they take. So when a case is taken, I mean, even if you go back over the last 15, 20 years, they should, when there's been issues with the way children have had issues when they've been born, right?
Yeah.
And there's been horrific cases, and there's like been horrendous payouts of like sick. It used to be like, crikey, when it all started, we all thought 1 million was huge money. Now it's going like to maybe 8, 10, 12 million for the rest of their lives. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but when you break it down how much it is for the rest of life, it's not a lot. The problem is, you see, is that the Department of Health will always try and say we're not negligent to anything, and then when they do pay out, it's just, and for the families, it is the distress of having to fight and having to go to court and having to get. I mean, the Bridget McCall one was probably one of those ones where basically she was threatened by the Department of Health, including the then minister at the time, right? And that was the problem that you have. And people do have to go to court, and when they do, they find that the system is just basically not there. It should be sympathetic to people like that. They should never have gone to court. And then when the judgment comes out and the payout comes, the normal thing is that they say that this payment is without negligence. So even though when they are paying out the likes of the 8, 10 million, they still say it wasn't our fault. And there's no real justice for the family.
And Nick, just in the course of your work, I know do you cover much at courts or
well, my forte is council and politics, so I'd stay away from the courtroom, to be perfectly honest with you. I've had calls like the rest of the guys on the panel. I've had calls to solicitors in real life, if you like, away from work. And it's just really important to find someone you can trust. And I think I'm quite fortunate in the sense that I have found someone who I can trust, who is decent and honest, and who won't gouge you. Because I'm sure there are a lot of solicitors who would be quite middling in ability, I should say, and they would be there to just take full advantage of you, you know. And actually, I do wonder about solicitors. Full disclosure, I was in court on a driving offence back in 2018.
Yeah.
And I was up before the judge for 2 minutes, and I got a fine of €250 or something like that, you know, and about a couple of points on the license. I just wondered, did I really need to engage the service of solicitors for that? There was
You didn't.
no, you didn't.
He struck a plea with the Guardian. That was all, you know, really. But
You didn't need to, Nick. You could have gone up and spoke.
I paid €500 to this solicitor up in County Galway.
Wow.
500. No, well, the fine was €250. The fee for the solicitor was 500, and there was like 4 points on the license or something like that. So.
And you probably met him 2 minutes before you went into court.
In fairness, I travelled up once before the hearing, but he wasn't that bothered about meeting me. He was like, "Oh, I'll just see you on the day," and I was like, "Well, if I'd rather kind of have a chat with you before." But he didn't even turn up on time to my case. He had a quick word with the guards, and he didn't do anything. So I mean, it was very disappointing.
Well, I had a
In those
parking.
cases,
I
in
had a
those
park.
cases, when it
Sorry.
comes to traffic violations or whatever, often when you just talk to the guards yourself beforehand, and you have a reasonable enough case, they won't even get to call. You won't even get penalty points.
No.
I had a parking ticket one time, and I knew he was giving me a parking ticket, and he was sitting. I had asked him, could I park there, because I was long out of hospital, unwell, and I said, look, I want to rush to the chemist at 5:20 in the evening in opposite St. Michael's, and he said, you park there, I'll give you a ticket. So my friend went up for the tablets for me, and I sat in the car waiting for her with the engine running. And I couldn't find a parking spot. That I was after having head injuries. I was afraid to park, reverse into a spot, and I had a huge migraine. Anyway, to make a long story short, I refused, and I went into court, and there was a girl beside me, a poor girl, and she was saying, you should get a solicitor. And I said, no, I said, I'm going up myself.
I was with her in court.
No, you weren't on this particular occasion. And I went up and I spoke, and I said, and the guard lied through his teeth. He said that I had actually parked the car despite him telling me not to, and that he came up and checked my car and gave me a ticket. And I said, with all due respects, Garda, that is wholly untrue. And I know, I said, that it's not true. And the reason I know it's not true is because I was sitting in the car and I saw you pass me in your car on the bike. You looked me straight in the face. I looked at you and I said to my friend as she was getting into the car, I bet you he's given me a ticket. And she said he couldn't have, because he couldn't possibly have. You haven't left and you have your engine running. And he had given me a ticket. And I had embarrassed him so much, he turned to the judge and said, I think we let her, we'll just cast it aside. She's been through enough. And as I was walking out, two of the solicitors winked at me as if to say, well done. Now, I could have paid any one of them on the side 500, as Nick did, to go up and speak for myself. And if I hadn't been able or articulate enough or stupid enough to actually contradict the guard, I wouldn't have got off. The judge left it go.
Well, that could have gone two ways. That could have gone two ways, Mary, because basically, I mean, if you take on a guard like that in open court, it could go two ways. But you see, I caught him.
I caught him out because he had barefacedly looked at me, and then he put his head down, and I said, that's wholly untrue.
The judge copped it as well. But
he knew that I wasn't going. What could he come back and say? It was my word against his. And he knew that I was out. And everyone in the court got there was this audible gasp.
Under our constitution, every citizen in the Republic of Ireland has to have free and open access to court, and they're all held in public, except obviously with family courts who are held in camera. But that is not the case in practice, in my opinion.
Also with that, what is defined as a citizen in Ireland?
A resident even is protected under the Constitution.
Well, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Well, in the district court, there's no differentiation, but as you go up the line, there would be.
But it shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be, but the point I'm making is this, that the generality of citizens should be. Now, it's not. I contend that there isn't access to justice for the majority of the citizens in the Republic of Ireland.
You're right. You're 100% right, Pat.
And also, the poorer people in our society are being criminalized unfairly, in my opinion, because they cannot afford access to the courts. It's something that maybe some newspapers or media might take up. We might take it up ourselves here. The criminalization of the poor goes on every day in our courts, and there's not an eyelid batted.
Well, see, the problem is the system fundamentally, Pat. Okay, the problem is this. I mean, we had a problem with our young lad in a school where we felt that he was being bullied by the teacher who was the principal, right? And we went to our solicitor, good man in Limerick, right? And he could have taken on the case, and he could have, you know, racked up the bills, and then about a year later gave us the bill, and we would be nowhere. And he told me within the first 10 minutes, he says, Chris, your pockets aren't deep enough to take on the Department of Education. Let it go. Take them out of school, move them somewhere else. And that's exactly what we did.
Well, actually, we had an issue with my oldest son when I wanted to get him into a primary school. And there was an issue, it's slightly different, but it's connected to it as well. It was an issue with the catchment area for Scolida and Corbally. Now, we live around the corner from it. I can actually hear the school bell in the mornings. But for some reason, we felt outside the catchment area. Yet, kids in Meelick, which is miles away, they were inside the catchment area. So, but we didn't leave it with that, because we actually went to the Department of Education and we appealed it, and had a mediation there, and had a whole appeal board there as well. So we won. So sometimes, sometimes the system does work.
There are systems, all right, but as Chris said, justice is a different matter altogether.
Yeah.
So, except you have money in Ireland, and a lot of it, there's no justice. What do you think, Stephen?
Yeah, I feel the very same way, because I remember a case years and years ago. It was a friend of mine was telling me about this. He was actually in court. I think he had a parking fine or something like that. But he said that there was a lad before him, and it was quite obvious now that he wasn't, how would I say it? He wasn't very rich or anything like that. You'd easily know he came from one of the well-known estates. And the judge asked him, had he a solicitor? And he said no. And the judge says, well, do you know now that you could go to jail? Because I think he was caught with no insurance, no tax, you know, the usual. And it wasn't his first time. Yeah. So the judge said to him, you could be looking at jail, so you need to get a solicitor. So he turned around to a table where there were several solicitors sitting down, 5 or 6 of them, and he went over to them, and every single one of them just shook their heads.
I know.
We're not going to have the case. We're not taking the case. You know? So, I mean, that says it all. To me, that says it all.
Yeah, I heard stories about that, but you can see this is the program on theirmedia.tv, and tell all your friends about us. All our shows are up on our YouTube channel. info@theirmedia.tv is our webpage. When it comes, now this struck me because we had a meal out today for the very first time, Mary and myself, before we came to this program.
Who paid, Mary? Who paid?
Mary.
Well, I paid on the card, but Pat assures me he's paying me back.
Oh, hang on a second. Is this Wimpy?
No, we went.
No, I mean, no, Wimpy as in, give me a hamburger. I pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Popeye.
No, he's usually good.
You're not going to get that back.
He's usually good, but
we're recording this, Dad, so
is there any? I don't care, Pat. This is definitely need to be recorded and written down in evidence. Okay. Yes. The point of the matter is this, right? Again, you strike lucky again. No wonder your solicitor knows what you like, Pat. You get the women to pay. Is there any wonder why you had? No wonder the wife left you, for Christ's sake.
No.
Oh, that's low.
No, I'm only joking.
No, it's only a joke, and it doesn't matter. So,
we got it down in the old quarter.
Yeah, but it got me thinking as we were eating anyway, the food went all right. But
except the Pat complained there wasn't enough cream on his carbonara. And then she brought out cream, and then he complained it was too cold, so she came out with a new one to him.
I have a great story about Pat in a restaurant now.
Mary's leaving out half the story now as she's on it. Her food was cold as well, so she sent it back.
And well, they took mine back because his was cold, so they took mine back.
You have to remember, Les, the ovens have been off for the last 3.5 months. What did you expect?
No, they had it left in the counter, and by the time we said to them, look, we're here 45 minutes, how long does it take to get? And she says, oh, sorry. So she went over and she brought it down to us, but it had been there for about 20 minutes.
When it comes to eating out, is there a lack of imagination on the menus? Because you could go into any establishment, say in Limerick where we are, or in Tishan, and you have all the same things on the menu. There's no
Chicken.
imagination, is there? What do
Yes,
you
chicken and
More chicken.
Chicken.
I think they have chicken as well. And there's a bit of
Chicken in the
chicken
basket.
and a small bit of beef, followed with chicken.
I just wish, as somebody who's a pescatarian, that there was more fish
I thought you were
on menus.
Presbyterian.
Now, all you get is you get
I
salmon.
thought you're Catholic.
You get salmon, or you get you get salmon, or you get fish in batter, and you get chips, or you get mashed potato, and you don't get enough. You get a scoopful normally in places. Now, I have to say, the place we were today, the food is just the fish and chips.
Beautiful.
The fish, I've never tasted batter like it. It's so delicate. You know, it's not other places I've been. You actually cut off the batter and the fish falls out, and it's about a third of the size of the batter.
It was a bit cold though. That's the only thing.
Huh?
The food was a bit cold there though in the old quarter.
Yeah, but they brought me a fresh new one and apologized, and
You think it's fresh?
even cold it was nice. But
At that
you know,
stage, we didn't care what it was. It could have been octopus. But Dirk, what do you think? Is there not enough imagination done with our menus?
No, there isn't. But I have to be fair though. When I first came to Ireland, eating out wasn't an option because there was nothing there. You had to Hong Kong, and that was about the height of the whole cuisine in Limerick. But
Jasmine was here.
over the years, it has come up a small bit. So I mean, I have to say that. I have to admit that. Like, but I mean, I come from a place where you could have a different meal for every day for different cuisine as well. Like, and it's a small enough town, like. So I mean, I was kind of surprised when I came here. I was like, there's nothing here. Like, I mean, my favorite food is Greek. My favorite restaurant is a Greek
We
restaurant.
don't have a Greek restaurant here in Limerick.
Yeah, that
Do we?
wasn't a great one though.
Yeah, but I mean, aren't all the restaurants here really geared for the Irish people and for what they eat and for what they like?
Yeah,
Rather than, you can't go and have Indian food or Chinese food or Italian food. But generally, it's for Irish. It caters for Irish people.
There's Thai food as well, and that's delicious.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Nick, what about you now? What's your favorite food? And do you think there's enough imagination done with menus?
Me? Oh,
No, it would be nice to try some new things. There's only so many times you can try chicken and chips or whatever. You know what I mean?
I saw your lunch today, boy. I saw your lunch today on Facebook.
Well, there you go. Yeah, you see it then, don't you? Chicken and chips. Although it was nice to be back in the Glenthaven. Dirk's from the Netherlands. The Netherlands cuisine is spectacular. I have to say, he's right. You can have something different every day of the week. Here it is very plain, and it's just.
But you know, there's an enormous Polish community in Limerick, and I have yet to see. I could be wrong. A Polish restaurant.
And why do you think that, Mary?
Wouldn't you imagine Polish people would frequent Polish businesses?
No, they don't go out. The Polish people don't go out like what we do.
Imagine, the African community is big here in Ireland, in Limerick. Wouldn't it be fabulous to have an African restaurant doing lots of spicy foods and just gorgeous?
I think
kangaroo and octopus.
I think Stephen has hit the nail on the head. It's Irish food. It's Irish palates here. Okay, I mean, I heard this story about in the UK that some Asian restaurants will not serve the Asian community because the spices is too mild for their palate, because they want it super hot, and if they sold it super hot, the English people will probably drink more water than eat the food because they can't take it. And I've heard that before. That's a fact, that the Asians are so used to the type of different spices that the Western culture here is not used to. Your question about because they've been brought up with that spices from birth, while we're not. We may only do it once.
And
every
the
6
Asians
weeks or
eat
whatever.
a lot of fish.
Exactly. Now,
in China and Japan.
You made the question about why don't the Polish do it. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, some of the Polish shops that they have to cater for their own food, some of them have actually closed down, right? And that's just groceries. Now, the fact of the matter is, and this is the way I see it from in my own observations. Polish people don't go out like Irish people. Nigerian people don't go out like the way Irish people do. It's as simple as that. They have a different culture. It's a completely different culture.
Yeah.
We're a pub culture.
Yeah.
The Polish are more of a restaurant, family, have your meal, one drink, home you go, do the rest at home. That's what they do, right? Nigerians don't do that.
Our culture though now, isn't it? You know,
And that's and what's happening now in this country is the way the continental Europeans have always been that way, because one, they have the weather, we don't, so we're all crammed into pubs. But you're talking about menus. I mean, look, it's just what they do in a restaurant here, and you can go to whatever restaurant in town. It's the same thing because they know what sells,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's it.
I mean, it was a pleasure today being down in the old quarter, because what I said to Pat was, even sitting out, do you know the way you'd be complaining about, oh God, I have to sit out in Ireland and it's raining. They have these heaters out in underneath canvas type roof.
Canopy is called there.
And it's just so warm inside there. And as well as that, I noticed, and I've noticed it a few times in there, they let you, like there was a man there with his chihuahua, and the chihuahua was just walking around outside in the place. And it was a pleasure to be able to walk in and see people. And I've seen people many times in there with their little dogs sitting down. And, you know, and it's just a pleasure to see that. Do you know?
And we were just saying there a while ago, Dirk, about Nick remarked on it there about the food or the cuisine in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Did you notice a big difference then, obviously, when you came here?
Yeah, massive.
Yeah.
Massive. Yeah, I mean, as I said, to me, there were no restaurants really. Texas Takeout, Hong Kong, and that was it. I mean, no. And as I said, I come from a relatively small town, but for every night it's not like we went out every night for a meal, but if you wanted, you could, and it would be a different cuisine. I mean, we had Greek, we had Afghan, we had Italian, we had the whole Japanese, Indonesian, you name it, it would be there, like.
Mayo chips.
Yep. Oh, stop. Mayo, mayonnaise.
Or an Italian restaurant here in Limerick, and the Italian restaurants are nice to go to as well.
Bella Italia is lovely.
There's an awful lot of Chinese restaurants. Obviously, there's an awful lot of Chinese restaurants in Limerick. So it would suggest that the Irish palate, it's certainly around us here, must be in favour of Chinese food, what they call Chinese food. So,
and Italian.
But the Chinese food that they get in those restaurants, Pat, is not the real Chinese.
It isn't, and Chinese people have told me that. What they eat a lot of is vegetables and fish.
Chris, as you said earlier about the UK, the taste there, or the palate there, Vindaloo, it's not Indian. It's actually completely. It's a British invention.
It's
as is chicken tikka masala.
What you say, Nick?
As is chicken tikka masala. That's an invention from Birmingham in the UK.
Chicken tikka, yeah.
Pat, I'll tell you, Pat. I mean,
say in a Brummie accent, and it really will sound Brummie. I can promise you, genuinely.
Well, Pat, if you ever talk about, I mean, when you're talking about places that, I mean, Dirk is there from Holland, and we were there in Holland last July for 4 days in Valkenburg, which is just 10k outside of Maastricht. And I mean, I say Dirk knows Maastricht like Valkenburg like the back of the hand. And there's this just by the square. You cross over like I think there's a river there. And you just go over the bridge, and there's like four kind of streets. One like goes up, another one, and they branch out, and then there's another one, and there must be at least door to door 70, 80 restaurants, and they are packed. Packed. And there's every different imaginable cuisine that you could think of. and we're walking, and you know what? There's actually too many places because you're thinking, no, we'll go here. No, we'll try that one. No, we'll try. So you've actually too
Too
much
much
choice.
choice.
You've too much choice, right? And you're spending
Well,
an
you know,
hour
after
walking up and
that,
down trying to pick the best restaurant that you can. But the problem is the best restaurant you like is packed and you can't get a seat because they're all liking it. So it's very, very
And
difficult.
what about you,
Funny.
where you are, Nick?
I beg your pardon.
In the UK, what's it like food-wise? The variety.
It's better than here, I will say. There's perhaps more pub grub, if you like. There's not as much of that here as there perhaps should be. Yeah, there is a lot more, as Dirk said before. There's Greek restaurants, there's Bangladesh restaurants, there's restaurants from all Australian restaurants in the UK. There are restaurants from all around the globe.
Australian.
UK.
I mean, what would you get in an Australian restaurant?
Ostrich.
Kangaroo, crocodile.
Kangaroo. I don't know. Crocodile
Ostrich.
burgers.
That you wouldn't
Yeah,
get in
well,
an English restaurant, you know, because you'd imagine it would
yeah.
be.
You'll be
But
flipping
yeah, there
hopping
would
mad
always
after the
be
steak.
a better range, that's for sure.
Yeah, you'll
Would
be
you?
hopping mad after their steak.
Well, you don't pay for kangaroo by check.
That's right.
There you go.
So what we're seeing is there isn't enough variety, and I noticed that in the menu today when myself and Mary were out after a long hiatus.
Well, I just go for the same things all the time. If it's not fish, then
Well, I didn't feel like a big chunk of meat, so I said, and
chunk,
after that, if
a
you weren't
chunk
having-
of meat.
If you weren't having a steak,
Oh,
if you weren't having a steak, there's very little, and I only went for the pasta dish. Well, because I knew I'd eat it.
Well, there was pulled pork,
Rubbish.
Pork is
there.
amazing.
and there
pork
was
is
there was steak, baguettes, and there was
Chicken.
chips and fish.
Yeah,
Two different
probably.
types of fish, battered fish and
Like,
salmon.
for instance, I just give you, we leave it in. For instance, if you're not having mashed potatoes, in 99% of the rest of Limerick, you have chips. Why can't they do a variety of mashed potato with spring onion and a bit of, you know?
No.
I would sit down with mashed
can't you
potato
do a
and veg
roast?
and eat it.
Why can't they do a roast potato? For heaven's sake.
I've never seen a place with a roast potato or with a boiled potato. I
Yeah.
would go for roast and boiled potatoes and veg, and I'd be as happy as Larry now sitting down, and I wouldn't even order anything else.
Well,
Just
generally, you would in a hotel in Killaloe now, you get roast potatoes, or a hotel up the Maldron, you get roast potatoes up there.
yeah,
But the
give me a
Malden-
plate of veg and potato.
Malden actually is beautiful, lads, for afternoon, if you go for a coffee or tea, and their buns and things, and they're very, very, very reasonable price.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're reasonable.
Absolutely fabulous.
The one,
Guys, you make me-
the one
you make
experience
me
I had,
hungry.
sorry,
I want to go out after this for dinner. Where should I go?
the one experience I had, Pat, that was in Ireland, which was not great, considering that most of the Irish pubs would actually do cater for families. I remember when I was in Cork for a year, working in Cork Airport about 10 years ago, and the lads came down. There was no point me going home. So what they did was, because Cork and Tip were playing in the Munster Championship, so we decided they come down, spend a couple of nights down with me, and we went to. I was staying in Douglas, and there was I think it was O'Driscoll's in
O'Driscoll's pub, yeah, well,
O'Driscoll's pub, right? And we went for a meal after the match, okay? And Connor was only 6 at the time. No, hang on, he's about 5 or 6 at the time. So he'd be, kids like go for the mashed potatoes, right? And then, funnily, the mashed potatoes they brought out was full of chives and spring onions. And sure, Connor wouldn't eat it. No 6-year-old, 5-year-old would eat it.
No.
And I called over the girl and I says, is there any chance you could maybe have mashed potatoes without it? And she went, no, that's it. That's the way they come. Mashed potatoes like that. Right? I says, but what's the child eat? I said, he need chips. I says, well, we don't want to give him chips. We want to give him mashed potatoes, I says, that was it. So at the end, we paid the bill. And the worst thing sometimes, and I've said this before, the worst thing someone can actually say when you're paying your bill is, was everything okay for you?
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Because they're hoping, when they say that, they're thinking, right, we've got his money, he's going, let's just see, just be charming, nice, whatever. Until I says, well, actually, funny now you asked. right? And they go, well, what happened? And I says, can you take on constructive criticism? I says, yeah. Do you take on suggestions? I says, yeah. Are you a family restaurant? Yes. Well, for God's sake, do us a favor and don't put chives and spring onions into a 6-year-old's mashed potatoes. Oh, we could have changed it for you. I says, well, have a word with her.
And Chris, I often wondered why your photograph was no Driscoll's in Douglas. Now I know.
Yep.
Do you know the one restaurant I think has that, the one in particular that has kept up its standards from day one? And it's a pleasure to go into because the staff are always lovely in there. And that's the Jasmine Palace. I've always loved going in there. And when you go in, even whether it's for the that all you can eat buffet, which, you know, obviously you can't eat every, you know, I'm full after the dessert or the starter, I mean.
You go to dessert first, Mary. Yeah, okay.
No, I go to the, well, I only usually eat a starter and a main course. But, you know, I like the buffet because you can eat just as much as you can eat. And
you can choose different meals.
Huh?
What's the crack? Anyone know what the crack is with buffets in the post-COVID-19 era? What's the crack with them?
Well, we didn't know because we were going to go to the Jasmine Palace, but it wasn't open the time we wanted to eat. But there's no doubt, before I forget it, it has the nicest curry in Limerick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think there's any buffets being served at the moment.
I think there's some advice. I was talking to someone yesterday, and there's been some advice from Fulcher Island around, for hygiene purposes, not serving buffet at the moment.
Oh yeah. Next thing they'll want you to have a mask with a hole in it for eating your food.
But there's a difference between, but Pat, there's a difference between buffet and carvery.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So I take it the carvery is okay because it's usually the chef that gives you the portions.
Yeah, you can line up, spread out. That's true. Yeah. The rest is help yourself. Yeah. You cannot be serious as the program on lairmedia.tv and info@lairmedia.tv, and we're delighted to be chatting to Nick, Stephen, Dirk, Chris, and Mary. We put on I suppose I'd expected to be more people on board, but should we give it a lash anyway? What are your highest and low points in your life? Now, I mean, I haven't had a low point yet, so that's just me. But
yes,
we'll go around the people. Mary, what about you? All the high points in the last 5-6 years since we know each other. Obviously, excluding that part of your life, you must have had other high points as well.
Well, the low point would always be you know, it's always the same for everyone, but the lowest point in my life was my parents' death. That'll always be the lowest. And I suppose the highest point.
That's because
so far, apart from pardon.
That's because they died so close to each other.
Yeah, I mean, sudden death is fantastic, they say, for the person that dies, but it's the person left behind, and then when they're faced within a day or two of a few hours with having a mother that is unable to speak or hear, and is diagnosed within 4 days and dead within a few months, the same day as that will always be horrific, and I don't think I'll ever get over it. But I suppose apart from getting my doctorate, which was an absolute nightmare of a process because my supervisor went on 2 maternity leaves just after each other. She came back for a day and told me she was 8 months pregnant and went again. And so that was 2 years she was out. But apart from that, the best moment of my life was when I got the civic reception from Limerick for the research, because it's not so long ago that the only small Jewish community in Limerick had been hounded out during the what's called a pogrom, even though no one was killed. But it was nice to see the city kind of recognize somebody's work in Holocaust studies, and that for me was the highlight of the whole time since 1992 and 1993. They were that was the best achievement, that and my PhD. Yeah.
And Stephen, what about you? You didn't use any
High
of those in your
points
backstop,
in my
no?
life would be getting married.
I told you he'd say that. I
Yeah.
told you.
Getting
What?
married.
That was a high point, was it?
Yeah, and my
Yes,
grandniece coming along. She's only
I'm
two.
flipping shocked altogether. Go on anyway. We all have our own troubles.
Yeah, my grandniece coming into my life. She's only 2 now, and she's a
It's lovely.
green. Noreen's grandnieces and grandnephews coming into my life as well. Mad extended family now. That was very that was a good point in my life as well. Actually, anytime I go out to Thomond Park to watch Munster, always a blast. You know, I love going out there. Absolutely love going out there. Low points. My father passing away, and my sister-in-law passing away when she was 44. That was quite bad. But the lowest point in my life was a few years ago. I almost did away with myself.
Well.
That was the lowest point in my life.
I didn't know that, Stephen.
Stephen,
Nobody does.
Nobody
does.
But can I ask you a question, if you don't mind? Obviously, you're here, so it didn't happen. Why do you think it didn't happen?
Simply, my wife. She didn't leave it happen.
Oh.
And that's giving you an honest answer. No, she took me out. She brought me out of it. Okay. And that would have been the lowest point. But I tend not to dwell on that. I tend to go for the high points in life more than anything else.
We've all been there,
Absolutely.
Stephen.
Yeah,
we've all been there. It's not a nice time, and it's a very isolating time. You're suffering individually. Everyone that suffers depression suffers the same way.
But asking the question, now you can say about your high points, and if you want to say about your low points, you're welcome as well. So there's no pressure.
It's no pressure. Yeah.
What about you, the high points and low points, whatever you want to say, like whatever you want to tell us?
What are you asking?
Nick.
Oh, me, sorry, I do apologise. Stephen, I just have to say I'm
getting knocked out of Europe again.
Stephen, I'm deeply impressed with the fact that you've just admitted that live on air.
I am too, Stephen. Absolutely, hugely impressed with you.
Huge thing to say. So that must have taken a lot of courage and a lot of bravery. So really,
kudos to you.
Kudos to you. Thanks. I went through something quite similar in 2017. I'm sure, I think Mary, Tony and co probably remember I was probably in a bit of a state, and, you know, they were good to me, you know, and I thank you guys for that in part as well. I think I'd set a date in my mind towards the back end of August 2017. I'd sort of decided at the start of August, if things don't get better, then I'm going to do it, you know. It's being take my own life. Fortunately, I actually changed up my medication, and it's things gradually improved. And you don't feel amazingly good, but you just feel normal, and you know, you don't go through those horrible peaks and troughs. There were various reasons, but it's not an experience that I would wish upon my worst enemy. It's just horrific. It's just really.
You won't go back to the way it was.
Well, even when I do not feel great, right, and I'm be honest with you, I'm not feeling 100% now.
Yeah, I can see that, Nick.
I don't think I'll ever go back to the point where I was as low as I was. I'm on a course of Prozac. I'm not afraid to admit that, because it completely numbs my emotions. I can't cry as much as I'd like to. I can't show my emotions as much. It numbs your emotions. But it's damn well better than the alternative. It really is, you know. So yeah, that have been easily my worst experience over a period of 3 or 4 months back in 2017. Really, really bad, you know.
And between
And your high points, Nick.
between that and now, would you say, I don't know how to, would you say it's
Yeah.
getting up a bit better since then?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. 100%. I mean, I'm never going to be deliriously happy, but you know, I don't think I'm ever going to be crushingly sad. Touch wood, of course, touch a lot of wood, but
Yeah.
I'm interested. I'm interested to know, Stephen, actually, why, what your comment about you're never going to feel that way again. Can you maybe expand on that for me?
Well, basically, okay. Since then, okay, I've been. You get depressed every now and again. Okay, you lose a bit of focus. You feel as if everything is going against you. But
Yeah.
this time round, when that happens to me, what I do is I fight it. I fight it an awful lot more now than I did then. Okay, I just
What
don't.
do you do to
will not,
fight it?
I will not leave it get me down. Absolutely no way in hell, because I'm not going back to that again.
Find something that focuses your
Yeah,
attention
find something
away from.
I mean, what I did was one time I did a course. You know, it was just for a few weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, but at least it gave me something to do. I took my mind off of everything. You know,
This is good. This is good for people.
Yeah.
You cannot be serious being part of the station, coming in and talking. And I think everybody that's been on it has said the same thing. It's focused their attention away from. There's nothing worse than when you're left with your private thoughts. When I was on my own, after Mum and Dad died, particularly after Dad died, because it happened so suddenly, I thought my whole world had ended. And then Mum was taken so quickly. And I sat outside in the kitchen one night with a container of tablets. And a friend of mine, a dancing colleague of mine, walked in and took the tablets from me and threw them down the sink. And there have been, don't know whether I would have taken them, don't know whether I would have been brave enough or whether I would have been, I don't know, to have taken them. But the thoughts went through my mind so many times, which is why I was driven, completely driven. Then, then I got into the wrong relationship for me. And, it was depression after feeling that you were useless and worthless and a failure. And education was my way out of it. I started pushing myself. I tried to find a course to try and make something of my life, to be me. I had always been who my parents wanted me to be.
Well, to come back
Suddenly I was trying to find who I was.
To come back to my point again, if you ever feel as if you're going that way again, talk to somebody immediately. Somebody that you trust.
Talk to me,
to them
Nick.
immediately.
And
or Stephen.
And Dirk, what about you? High points or low points, or whatever you want to say?
Well, yeah, it felt like it was kind of one of my high points. It almost felt like I'd come a bit of a full circle, really. One of my high points was like about a year after I fell into that deep dark hole. I actually won an award for a piece I did for my employer, the Limerick Leader. I'm a journalist, and that kind of that made me feel like I'm back, and it was the most amazing feeling to be recognised like that. It's not something I'm used to be honest.
You're a great political and business journalist, Nick, and you deserve that recognition. Yeah. They're lucky to have you.
Now we're going over to Dirk. Dirk, I probably misheard you. What about you, Dirk? Have you anything to share about the highs and the lows and whatever?
But we could do a whole show on just my low points, literally, because I had many, too many sometimes even. But if I want to, I'll just pick one, and it's the year 1996. Started off with first of all, my grandmother died. Now, the woman meant nothing to me because I met her once in my life. But it was a catalyst of getting reconnected with my father again, who hadn't seen for 18 years prior to that. So she died, and he rang, and he said, well, would you all come to the funeral? And myself, my siblings said, okay, well, you can see, just out of interest, like more curiosity, nothing else, like, because I couldn't care less about the woman, really. So we went in the funeral, and kind of we did our thing, and then I saw my father there at the front of the church crying. I think, well, clearly the man must have some feelings. So then, but that was it. Like, we said condolences, we walked away again. Then, after about 2 weeks later, my own mother died. Well, sorry, in between, I hurt my back as well. And then 2 weeks later, my own mother died, completely out of the blue. So it was only 60 at the time. So I was devastated. I was broken. Because I still hear the phone call I got every night. The phone call I got my sister saying that mom had died, and I didn't have a car. I had a bicycle, and even though it was a bit of a journey, I was in her apartment within a few seconds. I don't know how I did it. It flew, because my sister was surprised when it showed up there. She said, well, how did you do that? Anyhow, then, because as I said, I had hurt my back as well. I was diagnosed with a herniated disc in my back, so I needed an operation. That was shortly after my mother died, a few months, but a couple of weeks later, I had my operation done. That was quite painful, but I recovered from it. And then a few weeks later, my wife was hit by a truck on the way from work, and I was still working half days that day because I was still recovering from my operation. I remember it because I was at home and I heard the sirens going, because we weren't working too far away from where we lived. I could hear the sirens going all over the place, and I knew there was something wrong. I knew it was my wife. I just knew it. I just felt it. I knew it. So I rang the police station. I said, can you please check if something, because she wasn't home yet, which was rare for her as well. And I said, could you please check if there has been an accident on this route? Now, the lady in the police station was quite rude to me, and she said, well, sorry, mister, but so many things can happen during the day, like I'm not going to check that for you. So I told her to fag off. So I rang the hospital then, and they confirmed, yes, your wife is here on the table at the moment. And then I got a call back from the police, so it's the same lady again. So, oh, very sorry, we checked for you. There's a squad car on the way. So never mind, my sister picked me up. So she was hospitalized for about a month then. She had broken her leg. The truck had driven over her bike. That saved her leg, actually. And he had slowed down. She was going straight on. He was turning right. The light was green for both of them. And she was in his blind corner. And so he kind of nudged her that she fell down. And then he drove over her bicycle. And the bicycle pushed that on her leg, which broke her leg severely. There was bone missing after it was open wound. So that was that. But in between, as I said, the connection was there again with my father. So bit by bit, that built up again as well. So he came to my house apartment during all of this, and we had a good chat with each other. And he asked me for forgiveness, and I was thinking, well, I have two options now. I can tell him to fuck off, and because he hasn't been there for 18 years, or I say, listen, I just keep going. We started on a fresh day. We started anew, and that's what I did. I accept his apologies, forgiveness, and we were done. Otherwise, I would have been a bitter man anyhow. So a few weeks later, he had a heart attack. I said, Jesus, I mean, this is after, just after getting to know the man again, and he's been taken away again. Luckily, he survived. He was very ill afterwards, and he stayed ill until he died, but 20 years later or so. But yeah, that was 1996 for me, which wasn't great. And then a couple of years ago, because things in my life always happens in threes or fours. And well, first of all, I lost an eye, as Mary said as well. That was about 10 years ago, and actually that was the one time, not the first time when it happened, because my eye was operated and initially everything was fine, and then the first checkup they said no, the retina's been detached again. We have to go in again, and I knew then there's a chance in hell that this is going to be the outcome is going to be positive. So
but you're lucky in one sense, Dirk, because you could have lost your second eye very close. You know.
No, this was still the first eye. The second eye comes
still
later.
The first eye.
So and then at that stage, after the checkup, I was in the same place as you, Stephen. I was thinking, shall I just run across the road and end it? I was thinking, well, then again, that helps no one. That helps no one. That doesn't help me. Definitely it's not going to help my family, my wife and children. So I thought, no. I'm going to deal with this. Like I did before, I think when something bad happens to me, I'll deal with it. I'll take the positive out of it instead of dwelling on. So I did it this time as well. And then a few years later, same thing happened with my other eye. On that time, when I went to the hospital, they said, well, we have to operate you. There was no consultant there to operate me, so I had to go to Cork the following day. But a night I came home, the same night, and this sounds bizarre, I got a call from my sister in the Netherlands saying, bad news for you, Dad is dying.
Oh,
I said, Jesus. And I told them as well about my eye, and I said, but whatever you do, do not tell him. Do not tell him, because if you do, I'll never forgive you.
Yeah.
She told him anyhow. But so, and I was thinking, all these thoughts were going through my head, and like, I mean, knowing it went wrong the first time the operation, I think I'll never see him again. Because I couldn't fly over, because the operation, I wouldn't be able to travel. I'll never see him again.
Yes.
And again, I was thinking about, let's say, I can sit down here, I can start feeling sorry for myself and sorry for everything, and I blame everyone, blame the world, blame God, blame whoever I want to blame. It's not going to help anyone. So I'm going to take it as it comes.
Doesn't
and
help
I still got to see him a few times afterwards. The operation was a success. I flew
So would that be your high point, Stephen or Chris? Dirk?
My high point is my children.
Yeah.
And there's one particular moment I want to highlight, and it's great, was the birth of my daughter. And I hated the song at the time, You're Beautiful by James Blunt. But the minute she was born, that song came on the radio in the maternity ward. So You're Beautiful, and it choked me up, and I was thinking, wow, I mean, how blessed am I as to have a beautiful daughter now as well.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had that if you'd taken your own life.
Exactly.
And Chris, what about you? Some high points and low points, if whatever you want to, I suppose.
Get the high points out of the way first. I say that's the best thing. Obviously.
I love the way Chris comes out with things. Just get the high points out of the way. That's me being here all night with my low points.
There isn't that many, I'll be honest with you. I mean, well, I mean, I'm just sitting here nearly in tears listening to lads, you know, and you know, it puts a lot of things that we suffer from as individuals into perspective. As I suppose as human beings, we do go from crisis to crisis and try to see if we can survive the next crisis, and that's basically how I would probably say, which is my life, going from basically one episode to another. The high points is surprised that I'm actually here at 50 years of age, to be totally honest with you. Not that I've had to go through what Nick and Steve have, but it's just the way I feel. Definitely been married for nearly 18 and a half years, which is a bit of an achievement, I think, in its own right. Having probably my two best friends living with me in my son and my wife, the crack we have sometimes is just laugh. It's like what was that show years ago? Rowan and Martin laughing. It's just like a laughing. It's just we just take the mick out of each other, and Pat knows that. Yeah. First of all, before I go any further, I want to apologize to Pat for what I said earlier on. Okay, it's been on my mind for the last 45 minutes. I shouldn't have made enough. I shouldn't have made, and I would put my hands up when I make a mistake, and I've made a mistake, and I apologize to Pat.
When he said, Pat, he said, no wonder your wife left you.
But when I put both of my hands up, see that
I said that to him as well.
Right? You haven't been the first, and you won't be the last.
So I apologize, Pat.
Any call court, man.
Right, but that's actually a bigger insult. But he's aware of that. The second, I suppose, having those two of my best friends living with me, going everywhere. The highest points would be watching my son being born, because there's a reason for it, and that's because one of the low points gets to my life would actually has become one of my high points, and I get to that in a second. I think anytime, and I think I'm a bit of a resilient character. I mean, my CV would have a load of different jobs that I've done, and I just like to prove to myself and to others that I can do the job that I go for. And what I fear with kids when in the next few years is that I don't know how well they're going to take rejection.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I mean this because, and I do have a problem the way the society has been going in, and Pat would know I'm very into sport. I've been a sports administrator for like 25 years. I was a chairman of my local GA club for 2 years. That was a high point. The low point, one low point is the reason why I had to resign, because of the abuse that goes with the position, which can lead to that. But I do think, we as human beings are kind of trained to stumble from crisis to crisis, and the key is how do we survive it? And I've always, I'm a low point, a massive low point for me was about 9 years ago when I was, I lost my job spuriously because basically the company, I had to take them to an employment tribunal, and I couldn't get work for 8 months because of it. And a high point, you do get low points and then you do get high points. And the high point was that I found a job and a person who believed in me. And even though I have left that employment, myself and that managing director are good friends. We go out on a regular basis for a meal or drinks, and we meet up with those colleagues maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And it's people who I always think a high point is someone who gives me an opportunity, and I do not let them down. Okay, that's always been my way. I try not to let people down when they've given me a chance. A high point definitely was becoming chairman of the GA club. Low point was having to resign to the abuse you got through it. Definitely a high point was getting jobs when you probably didn't think you had a divine right to get that, and proving someone giving you a chance. Low points have been where, as I said, 10 years ago when I was working, it was actually finished. I actually was working in Cork Airport, but it was basically I was working in Shannon Airport and then down in Cork, and it was tantamount to bullying that was going on, and I had to take him to an employment tribunal. Eventually won, but it basically cost my income for 2 or 3 years because of the level that I was at, and it was a low point, and and that low point can lead to what I call the domino effect.
Yeah,
that just goes from one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
it's never the cause, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's the thing that just sets everything off.
I have a saying, Mary, that everybody is only maybe 3 paychecks away from disaster.
Yeah.
Maybe
okay.
one
maybe 3, an average 3.
Yeah.
But 1 can, right? But 3, right? Because I think people can survive 1 and 2, but after 3, they're in on murky ground.
I have a slightly different philosophy in that.
Let me.
You'd be surprised on how you can survive on very little money.
Which I did, but I tried that for 8 months.
You'd be surprised. You just have to change your lifestyle a bit, and it's not that possible. I mean, I've been out of work for a good bit now.
Yeah, it's what I call, Dirk.
But I actually have more money in my pocket now than when I was working.
It's what you do. It's what I call, you put the brakes on everything, right? You put the brakes on spending. You basically stop. It's like withdrawal symptoms to everything. You're going out, even going for a pint, even going for a coffee. You just basically says, right, the handbrake is up on everything.
But you prioritize things.
Yeah.
So you take stock and you say, what is really important to me?
But the lowest point in my life, well, a couple of lowest points. One is ongoing at the moment, to be totally honest with you. One of them was when my wife was pregnant and she miscarried at 3 months. And we had made the decision, because my wife is 6 years older than me, and she was pregnant at 39, and she had been married before with 3 kids, and I wasn't particularly, I said, look, it's your choice, it's not never, right? So we had lost that child after 3 months. And I never forget the person who they said, did you want counselling? I said, look, sure, counselling, no harm. And then they sent this woman who definitely came out of some.
I must have had her as well, Chris.
I just get the feeling it was like someone out of the Mary convent or something. I don't know, but she turned around and said to me in front of my wife, she says, you can always get back on a horse again. And I says, sorry, but my wife has no horse, right? It's her decision. Right, and she made a decision that we said we'll go again, and it was when Connor came and she was 40, which it's borderline. Women adopted 40 is borderline, and that's the highest point I have.
My mum was 40
from the lowest point.
Yeah, the last child, 46.
This is bad.
And the lowest points at the moment is really seeing my mother at the moment, who is a permanent resident of St. Joseph's, and I haven't seen her since March. I'm going in. I have an appointment for Sunday morning to see her for the first time since mid-March. She had a massive stroke, and watching the doctors basically tell me inside an acute ward inside in the regional that you can go and get the doctor, or so you can get the priest to say the last rites. And watching her go she had been going downhill for a while, and watching her go from a person who was outgoing to being withdrawn, and now where she can't even walk.
That's St. Joseph's Hospital in Ennis.
In Ennis, yeah. And
because we have a St. Joseph's here in case anyone is watching that. It's not the same.
She's not able to look after herself. And the lower point going on was when she had to go home. She was determined to go home, even though we knew that she wasn't able for it. And watching her deteriorate, and basically when it came to a point last July, 12 months, where I was on holidays in Germany when I got a phone call of what was going on with her, because there was a family member was designated to look after her. And when I came back from holiday, we basically got her we basically said, that's it, you cannot stay at home any longer. And that was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. And it's still an ongoing low point, because it's going to be with you until whenever. Also, and this is where I'll finish, watching your wife's parents die over the last 4 or 5 years with extreme haste. And I'm talking about her dad, who was a builder. You'll know, Pat will know my wife's dad. He was from County Down. He used to work in the buildings, finished when he used to work for one of the Clohouseys in Limerick, built Ballycummin inside in Raheen, built the Oak and Arms. He was a roofer. I reckon he was one of the best roofers in Munster. He was from County Down, loved his football, loved these Hennessy as well. and when you see a man go in decline for 4 months, and then 2 years later see your mother-in-law go in decline within 3 weeks, it's just so tough to watch.
Well, I had the same with my mother-in-law 3 years ago. She within 4 weeks, she went to the GP. He sent her to the hospital. 2 weeks later, she was in hospice. And then 2 weeks later again, she passed away.
What she died of? Their cancer, was it?
Can't say. I was just middle of it with us. We didn't know, and unfortunately, to make matters worse for myself, then because I was in pain at all. This is all the stress. This is just because I couldn't move my arms anymore. It was just very painful. I really felt like I was being torn apart, literally torn apart from all sides, and I couldn't do anything anymore. So I went to the GP. Then I said, I think it's stress. And they said, no, it's not stress. It's actually it's more than that. So she sent me to the hospital, and that was diagnosed with the rheumatoid arthritis. And that's something I'm dealing with now for the rest of my life. But that has that has given me in a way a new lease of life as well, because at the moment I'm actually training people to live well with arthritis. It's a course I'm doing with Arthritis Ireland. I was trained a couple of months ago, and I do about six sessions every couple of weeks. And some of the people I meet on those courses, they're just amazing. They make you humble. You think you have problems, then you hear some of the stories coming out of.
But I think things happen in people's lives, Dirk, that actually put them on a completely different trajectory.
Exactly.
And I mean, if you look at even COVID-19 now, out of that came our ability to actually, or being forced into using internet and using the Zoom that we never knew existed prior to COVID-19, and gave us all, I suppose, a medium through which we could actually talk about these subjects, because these subjects are incredibly important to people, because there isn't a person in the world at some stage who hasn't, well, there isn't a person in the world who hasn't been bereaved at some stage, who hasn't met the counselor, and I say that in inverted commas, from hell, like Chris talked about. And I certainly met one who told me it was selfish to grieve, that they wouldn't want to be back here, that they're happy where they are. I just left her with, who the hell told you?
Yeah, Mary, my feeling is this, and the comment I made earlier about I fear for the next generation, I mean that because, you know, I'm thinking that when we've been in lockdown for, look, we've been in so-called lockdown for 3 or 4 months, right, or 3 months, whatever, right? But this is absolutely no way in comparison to when people in between 1939 and 1945 lived, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. They basically had food rations. I mean, the biggest thing we ever had of rations was we're going mad over toilet roll. You know,
Yeah.
And I just find some things are first world problems. I mean, if you think now that everyone is coming out now, and I mean, I cannot say how impressed I am with Stephen and Nick tonight, and for you, Dirk, as well, and Mary, for the way you've spoken. I feel sometimes, should I even say anything, because it's hard to. It's not like I show you like playing a card game or whatever. Here's my problem, and I'll raise you two, and I'll see you that one. I mean, it's not like that. It's just, it's how we deal with problems as individuals. Okay.
Exactly.
Somebody's problem may be minor to somebody else, but it's major to them.
Major, it's every, yeah.
But what my feeling is this, is that I do feel that, and I see it here with my young lad at home. Okay. I don't think our kids are resilient and strong enough and streetwise enough to take on what's going to hit them for the next 5-10 years. I just feel that the difference is now is that depression now is getting the press it deserves, right? The LGBTQ community are getting their just desserts. If that sounds wrong, please correct me, but they're getting their just desserts. They're getting what they should have got 30-40 years ago. My point is, could you imagine going back in time what Nell McCafferty went through and what other people went through? Alan Turing, the guy who was the film that Benedict Cumberbatch was in, on what he went through, on all those people who had different issues or different, reasons to live, and how they were persecuted 40, 50,
And
60
what you mean
years
by
ago.
they're getting their just desserts,
Well,
they're
they're
finally
getting their
being
right. They're
recognised.
getting their rights that they.
They're
What I mean,
getting their
they're
rights,
getting
yeah.
their rights. I mean, if just desserts is the most wrong phrase, I apologize. It
No,
doesn't
no,
mean
no, no. Just so they know that if anyone is listening, that we're just saying that they're getting
No, it's not.
recognition
They're
and they're
getting the
getting
recognition
compassion.
and they're getting their rights that they should have been given over the last 100
Yeah.
and 200, 300 years.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
my point. And the point is this, is that look at the suffering that they had to go through and the suicides that they thought that they, and I mean, what did someone say to me before about it? When we had a guy here in Shannon that did it. And it was a young lad. He must have been about 21 at the time. He says it's a permanent solution to a
So
temporary
it's a
problem.
temporary problem. Yeah.
And
And that's the way I feel. But I just feel that our kids, I mean, they have absolutely, they're not trained to deal with
They're
rejection.
not equipped because they've been
Can-
told that anything they ever
Can I
want
say
in life.
something
And I
about
just
that?
feel that. I just feel that.
Go ahead, Dirk.
Can I say something about? And Chris, I totally agree with you, but it's also a small bit full of our generation because we never said no to our kids. Well, I did,
That's
but
it.
I know
That's
that I know there's a lot of they never said no to the kids. Go to the shop, they scream, "No, I want this." Oh, okay, you have it, and that's why there's no resilience. So we have to blame ourselves a bit as well.
Yeah.
Now, on the whole LGBTQ issue, totally agree with you there as well. They're due what they're getting, and they should have got that 45, 50 years ago, longer even. The only issue I have though, that's not only with them, everyone deserves their rights.
Yep.
And if one group gets rights and suddenly it's chipped away from others, that's going to cause resentment. And that at some stage you're going to go back even further than 40, 50 years. I think that's at the stage where we're at the moment. And I think that's what we should be very, very careful about.
I'm conscious of the time, folks. It has a way over time, and I don't know what to say other than from Nick.
Hello.
Fantastic contribution.
You're saying goodbye now.
Sorry.
We're saying goodbye, great Nick.
Fantastic contribution, Nick. Stephen, I think you have biplanes ready.
No, Nick, sorry, Pat. Nick wants to say something.
Yeah.
Can I just say, actually, thank you for inviting me into this session. I'm delighted to join, and it's actually been a very positive experience for me personally. So I really am thankful for that, Mary. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome, Nick. It's our honour.
Pat, before we say goodbye, can I say one more thing? It's on a lighter note. I have to say I'm a bit disappointed, Mary. I really thought that the highlight of your life was meeting me, but hey.
Well, it was, but I didn't want to embarrass you, Dirk. I mean,
to me, it was quite
Dirk
obvious
speaks,
that would have been it, but hey.
I could have said it if I was like you that speaks 5 languages. I could have said it in any amount of languages.
Anyway,
But I would have felt a bit awkward saying it to you in case it embarrassed you.
From Mary Honan, from Stephen Collins with the biplane revving up in the background. We'll go fly.
Yes. I had another lovely one up, but I wasn't allowed to use it.
From Dirk de Klein. From
Thank you
Chris.
very much, guys. Thank you.
It's absolutely been a blast, lads. And from your host, Pat, until we meet again from this edition of Your Cannabis Series, good night and good luck.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen, whatever.